Essentially, the United Kingdom has created terrorists. The number of Britons who have left home to join Daesh and similar extremist groups in the Middle East is on the rise, according to a new report. The British newspaper The Guardian estimates 850 Britons have gone to fight with Daesh or other terrorist groups in Syria and Iraq, a figure broadly in line with the British government's own estimate. Based on personal testimony of militants who have escaped from the Takfiri group, many foreign recruits to ISIL are treated as expendable, and The Guardian believes about 100 have so far been killed. It is also claimed the core of Daesh is made up of experienced, extreme militants from the Middle East and former members of the Iraqi army. Some Britons with computer or social science skills are also given high-profile propaganda jobs. Syria and Iraq have been gripped by foreign-backed militancy since 2011. ISIL terrorists commit brutal crimes against all ethnic and religious communities in Iraq and Syria. Shias, Sunnis, Kurds and Christians have all suffered attacks. In 2014, the US and its allies began carrying out airstrikes inside Syria against Daesh terrorists. Yet many of these same terrorists were initially trained by the CIA to fight against the Syrian government. How do the public feel about British-born terrorists now in Iraq and Syria? And are they angry the UK assisted militants in those places? Simple questions with important answers. The number of Britons who have left the UK to join ISIL and similar extremist groups in the Middle East is growing. What has disenfranchised so many citizens from UK society? We asked the public.
Online, isn't it? They're online looking at all these kind of things and being brainwashed by what they see online. That's what it is. You can't control the internet, can you?
It's not just British society though, is it? I mean, it seems to be a general youth dissatisfaction across Europe as a whole, which at its worst is expressed in Brexit.
To be honest, I'm not quite sure how and why they do that. It's something quite inane to us. I come from New Zealand, so we don't really have that issue at the moment, of radicalisation of people.
I think probably the way that it's not coming together as a community. People are really trying to find a place to belong, and that's providing it for them. I think that's one of a big reason why people would end up going there. Yeah.
I think fundamentally it comes down to people feeling outside, also problems in the country. I think obviously that what you mentioned about radicalisation, I think it's a problem that brews from both stuff in-house and outside. Communities feeling that the government don't necessarily treat them as they should do.
When you look at the last few months, we've seen terrorist attacks take place in France, Germany and Belgium, and there were threats of a terrorist attack happening in the UK imminently, and the British government have raised the terrorist threat level to its maximum, and this has caused a huge tension in the air. And there's been a lot of hateful comments towards Muslims over the past few months. And this has contributed to the idea of the clash of civilizations. Once again, this idea has resurfaced once again, and it's playing to the hands of ISIL, because ISIL are saying to everyone that non-Muslims hate Muslims and therefore Muslims should fight back. So anyone who thought of carrying out terrorist attacks or joining ISIL, this was probably the prime moment for them to do so.
First of all, I mean, we've been asking the British government, and we've been campaigning here for the last 3-4 years, since 2012. The British government has to stop some of the preachers in this country. For example, we complained about Chowdhury 2-3 years ago, but the British government didn't do anything. Now they jailed him, yes, they sent him to jail, but previously they did not want to take any action, hoping those elements, they will turn to be a moderate and they will topple the Syrian government. But that was not the case, as this is a Takfiri terrorist group as ISIS or Al-Nusra Front in the same time, which they have turned on Europe, as we saw all of us in France and Germany and other places.
An estimated 850 Britons have now joined ISIL, while Muslims have long criticised the UK government's anti-terrorism campaign, which also targets young children, as ineffective and anti-human rights. How does the public react?
I think the ones that, you know, that come out, they condemn it, don't they? You've seen it on the news, so I wouldn't read too. I wouldn't worry about that, because I think the real Muslims are, they say no, that's not on that. So.
Well, I'm not entirely convinced that everything that the government does is right. I think, you know, you've got to target the people who are doing the things, aren't they? And that's, you know, if Muslims are doing these things, and of course it's not really Muslims, it's just a very small minority of very stupid people, then why shouldn't they be targeted?
I think it needs to be stopped, but you can't say every single person in this country is going to turn out to be bad. It's just a few that makes it bad for all the rest.
I think they need to do their best to protect the Muslim community. I think there has been some Muslim marches lately with attempts to kind of detach them from ISIS's interpretation of Islam, and I don't think it hasn't really been given the media coverage it deserves. So yeah, I think more should be done to protect the Muslim community in Britain.
I think that the best way to make the people like in a balanced way, like it's just about talk. I think so, is communication. I think maybe it's something misunderstood. You know, I think if the Muslim community with British governments or whatever, they can talk, like sit in a table and discuss about what is wrong, what is right. I think they can find like a right point. I think so.
There are about 850 British Muslims have gone over to fight in the Middle East. Now, to understand that, you have to look at the context since 9/11. And in that context, we've seen that the British government have carried out certain policies, counter-terrorism policies, and one of which is the prevent agenda. Instead of tackling extremism, what the British government have done is that they've fueled extremism and radicalisation amongst the British Muslim youth. There have been human rights organisations and Muslim organisations who have criticised the British government's prevent agenda. And just to give you an example of the targeting of Muslims, it is now by law that school teachers right around the whole country should spy on Muslim kids for any signs of extremism. And there have been cases where police have spoken to families and children about so-called extremism, which never really existed. And this has traumatized the families, this has caused a lot of distress for them, and also a lot of distress on the communities, the schools that they go to. So Muslims actually now feel targeted by the state and by the British government. And these policies, I think, have fueled radicalization of the last few years.
Well, the point is anti-terrorist campaign, what you mean by the government, by the British government, is not working properly because it's selective. As we saw what's happened 2-3 days ago, a young Syrian boy hurt, and he was all over the newspapers, but at the same time there are thousands of children getting hurt in Syria, but nobody mentioned them. But so they are selective with this issue. The main focus for the British government is to topple the Syrian government, whatever it takes. Sometimes they turn blind eye on tourism, they turn blind eye on young, individuals go to Turkey, they cross to Syria. So the problem is when they have a double standard. The double standard says, okay, never mind who goes there, as soon as he can help to topple the Syrian government, which is not going to happen. And now I think they have realized it's not going to happen.
About 100 militants from Britain have now been killed. How do the British public believe Saudi Arabia's Takfiri ideology attracts them to fight in such dangerous territory?
I would honestly like, this is me personally, to have the level of conversation that I could go and talk to them and just say, what is it you want? I don't understand what they want. if you can understand that. Why are they fighting for something that seems to be alien to us all? And I'd just like to talk to them. I think any conflict, whether it's in this country or wherever, we should be able to mediate. We should be able to talk to people.
To be honest, I don't actually understand what makes them tick like that. I mean, we're all human beings and we all have to respect each other's religions and cultures and where we come from. We respect our people's cultures. We may not agree with them all, but we respect them. They have their point of view.
I think it's, again, just being a part of something that's bigger than you. The sort of decline in religion and that sort of stuff is probably playing a part in it as well. So being able to either fight on the British side or the ISIL side, it's just being able to fight for something you believe in, because you can't really do that just sitting at home.
I think it's the same reason why there's other people going out there to fight with the Kurdish. Same reason why they're going out to stop it is people swayed because of what they believe in is obviously what's fundamentally got in their heads to do it. The same as obviously we see every week, every day on the news where kids are being killed. You can take which way of that you want to look at it. Is our government helping by dropping bombs and doing what they're doing? But at the same time, it's adding to the problem. So it's what your interpretation of that obviously media's portrayed to you as.
I think they do that for one of two main reasons. The first, I think, is this idea that ISIL are trying to re-establish the caliphate, and there are a lot of Muslims who do believe in the caliphate, and a few of those believe that ISIL are the legitimate group who are bringing about that caliphate. So it's an Islamic ideal that they dream of seeing one day. Secondly, there's a huge propaganda campaign by Saudi Arabia and Qatar and other Muslim countries that are telling and Muslims right around the world that they should try and protect Sunni Muslims because they are under threat of being killed and annihilated by Shia in Iran, in Iraq and Lebanon. So they've created this fear and this propaganda campaign, and it's actually worked. There's quite a lot of Muslims from Britain and from other countries who are actually quite scared about the welfare of Sunni Muslims in Iraq. I've seen this firsthand. So this has led a lot of Muslims from not just Britain but other countries to go over and fight in the sense that they're trying to protect Sunni Muslims from being killed.
Well, Wahhabism, now we don't want to explain too much about Wahhabism, but Wahhabism will never succeed as a sector unless we'll get rid of all other Islamic sectors like Sunnis and Shiite and other 12 sectors. So that's Wahhabism, that's their mentality. Their mentality is to destroy, kill, maims, and destroy all the memory of Islam, so they can come out with a new thing. Unfortunately, Saudi Arabia paying lots of money in UK to back some of the preachers, to back some of the centers, and many of those centers now, they preach in Wahhabism, which is dangerous for the whole world. It's not just for Britain. As we saw in France, what's happened, we saw in Germany what's happened. Wahhabism is a takfiri. We call them in Syria, they are just killers. They are just chop heads, cut arms, kill who doesn't agree with them. If you agree with them, you are fine. If you don't agree with them, you have to be killed. So there's billions of individuals around the world. The Wahhabism or the Wahhabists would like to get rid of them, as we saw the cutting the head or the killing of the priest in France.
Roughly half of the 750 militants still alive who went from Britain to fight in Daesh have returned to the UK. The rest remain in Syria and Iraq. Hundreds more have been stopped before leaving the UK, or in Turkey, the main access route. Most have been under 30 years old and, according to UK police, more than 50 are women. Why, in the public's view, is Britain failing so many of its young people?
Is Britain failing that young population, or will there always be strands of sort of extremism, people looking for drama and excitement? Some people say they're watching too much violence on television, too much information is there on the internet, and it's like any cult, I suppose. If it gets into the mind of someone, it can turn people insane, this kind of philosophy on life.
I suppose there could be more to be done like that, you know, more money, maybe community programs, that kind of thing.
Everything is not clear. I mean, now everything, like, if someone like just run from the street with a knife is a terrorist. It's not true. Terrorist is a meaning and crazy people is another one. So I think the people under 30, as you say, maybe they just don't looking for information and then can understand. They just like impulse, like, okay, that's happened, this is my country, this is a terrorist, I'm gonna kill him. But go deeper and find what's gonna happen in the story. Back, like, why they do something.
I don't really know whether it's because they haven't lived that long and they get them when they're young, so they don't really know anything else, and they just get in their minds and they just go down one avenue. I really don't know. I just wish I could get hold of some of them sometimes and just chat to them and let them realise that they're not doing it right. It's not right what they're doing.
They use social media a lot to try and attract new recruits. I think younger people are more prone to being recruited through that. So maybe there needs to be more education around that and more regulation of it, because 14, 15-year-old girls are being told all these lies about some kind of nirvana-like life.
What it shows is the naivety of those people who have joined ISIL. It shows that they lack experience politically and religiously about the complex situation in the Middle East. And also what that does show is that they don't have a lot of political avenues in this country, in Britain and other countries to express themselves. They feel they're not being heard. In fact, most British Muslims feel they are not being heard by the state, and every time they try to form some sort of political bloc or political power, they have the rug pulled right under their feet. So this feeling of isolation and alienation and disenfranchisement has led to a lot of frustration and injustice felt amongst a lot of British Muslims, and some of them have resorted to try and go abroad and set up this dream of an Islamic sort of state that will bring about justice. But of course, I think most of these people have been quite short-sighted in their decision to join ISIL, because what we're seeing right now is anything but freedom and justice under the Islamic, so-called Islamic Caliphate.
Well, the point, I mean, Britain is not failing. I don't believe it's failing, these young people. Is allowing some centers and some mosques to breach that way. This is where the rules should apply. Britain also worked with Turkey, and Turkey was the main route to Syria for these individuals to cross to Syria to carry out atrocities. And we know, and everybody knows, the newspaper reported it, there is individuals also from around the world who they are on the international terrorist list, on United Nations terrorist list, on United States terrorist list. They arrived to Istanbul, and from Istanbul they crossed. So Turkey will never be able to do such a thing unless they have a pact with some of the Western countries like Britain and United States.
Britain and the US have long supported armed and trained militants in Syria. Why are so many people in Britain still not outraged by this fact? We asked them.
Maybe they've got more important things to worry about. You just had the Brexit thing, the economy's going down the pan, the Olympics have been going on, I just think there's probably more. It's not on the news agenda. I don't think it's high enough. I think there are more important things in them. To me, it's probably fourth or fifth on my thing. It's not something that really worries me.
Plus ça change, we're talking about the Afghani Mujahideen, we're talking about what's his name in Uganda, Idi Amin, we trained him, we helped him. We're talking about lots of people, and I think people have just got getting fed up about it, because, well, it just goes on, doesn't it? Things that are done in our name.
I don't think people know. I think it's a lot of like a lack of knowledge on that part, because I only found out a few months ago how the US was involved. So I don't think people really know. It's not told in the news as often as it probably should be. That's why people aren't outraged, because they just don't know.
I'm not sure where those opinions could go to. Where do you really turn with them? I think a lot of people would be or are angry who know about obviously that being the case, but at the time obviously the government were trying to help. It hasn't really worked out the way they intended to, obviously, but I don't think those opinions would they'd fall on deaf ears as much as anything else, I think.
I think that was the biggest mistake we ever did, was poking our nose into somebody else's business. I know it was wrong what he was doing, and I think perhaps, I don't know whether we did the right thing. I don't know. I think just the way we went around it was wrong, because since they went into there like that, it's just gone everywhere. It's just they're just fighting all the time, and I think we've poked our nose in. We shouldn't have gone in when we did. We should have found out more about it first before we intervened, I think.
Well, every time this question is posed to the government, to the British government, they quickly respond by saying, and they repeatedly say, that they are arming only moderate rebels. This is a big PR campaign, and it's worked for the British government, because the mainstream media, I believe, haven't done enough to put the British government under the spotlight and under any scrutiny to show and to expose that what they're really doing is arming extremist groups. So this narrative by the British government and the mainstream media is feeding into the public that the government are supporting and arming moderate rebels against a brutal dictatorship. Now, once that narrative is fed to the public, of course they're not going to be outraged. In fact, if anything, they're probably going to be supportive of the British government, because they feel that moderates are better than a dictatorship.
Well, let me say, maybe it's our media on the other side I don't know if they are doing very well. We don't have to forget the British media is very strong media. As we saw 2 days ago, the same people in Aleppo who killed a young boy of 12, cut his head on the camera, the same group of the AMC filmed that little boy sitting in the ambulance. But they are selective again. They picked up the boy sitting in the ambulance. They never showed the boy who is being killed by cutting his head. So the problem is, this media are strong. If you put them together between the United States media, some stations, the British media, which is leading media in the world, and they are selective and they work according to the British government rules. I know very well in 2014 and 2015 there were a gagging order. Gagging order, it means you don't publish anything unless we say so. So that's why they couldn't publish anything. This is the British government way of working. This is the British government rules, and the media has to obey it.
In a desperate effort to stop militancy in the UK, the British media and government target vulnerable people such as children and families with so-called counter-terrorism strategies. They also infringe the human rights of law-abiding Muslim citizens. With ever more Britons joining ISIL, perhaps the best strategy would have been different. After all, if we didn't want people to join terrorist groups in Syria, maybe we shouldn't have trained so many militants in the first place.